Cool. All right, we're ready to go. Yes. All right. Hi, guys. Welcome to episode 25 of Tiger Heart Chats. We are in Barcelona because we're doing this in partnership with ISE. The hashtag is ISE 2022. If you guys are listening, please share. This is my first guest on the first day at ISE Barcelona. I'm going to welcome to the stage probably one of the most nicest people I've met. I've been on a flight. I woke up really early. Everyone was kind of rushing here. I was stuck in customs for ages. And I needed to see a friendly face. And I was met by the wonderful Iffat Chaudhry from Involve Visual Collaboration. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, Sanj. It's a pleasure to be here.
No worries. How are you doing?
Really well. Really impressed with how the show's going already, day one. But I was here yesterday and at the launch last night with the ISE and the Iffats guys. An absolutely tremendous start to the show. Amazing.
So look, there's going to be people listening who don't know who you are. Give us a little brief about who you are and what you're about.
So my day job is I'm the bid manager for Involve Visual Collaboration. In terms of the AV industry, pre-sales, looking at all sorts of different technologies and supporting our sales team. So that's my day role. My own interest is really in people. Right. And what brings us together, what connects us, and in particular issues around diversity, inclusivity and equity in our industry.
Wow. And this is specific to the AV industry?
It is, yeah, because it's such a vast topic as it is. And sometimes I can't do it all. So it's about containing that and having conversations with people and finding out what's working well. And we're seeing so much change and progress in the industry from a technology point of view. Why on earth would we not want the same for the humans that make that industry happen and make things happen every day?
Yeah. And so there's going to be people who are listening who don't really know too much about audio visual. I was exposed to the industry when I started working with holographics like over 15 years ago. What's your perspective on the AV industry? What is it? If I was someone that was new to the space, how would you explain it to them?
So my very first run-in with the industry was 2006. I was teaching in a school and actually our AV integrator, I ended up working for them. So, and I was responsible for video conferencing. And at that time, it was quite cumbersome. Video conferencing was, you were talking about dial-up and connections and things that actually there were more barriers to it than it, we are now. Where we are now is obviously a lot easier. So anything that is, in terms of the technology, anything that can connect people, that's at the heart of the audiovisual industry. Anything you can see, anything you can hear, and it's at every level. So it's the shiny side of people see the glamorous side of it and the wonderful displays. And last night, the projection mapping, fantastic output. But there's obviously a lot of hard work that goes on to make those things happen. So that the technologists behind it are absolutely phenomenal at what they do.
Awesome. And how long have you been working in the space for now?
So since 2006, I had a break where I went back into teaching for a few years while my children were younger.
Wow.
But yeah, in and out. Not really. I think there's something about the industry that once you're in, and it's hard to leave.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that feeling very well. I mean, when I was exposed to AV, it was like another world. And you as you say, you take for granted just what you see on the face level. It's like amazing and it inspires you and connects with you. But at the same time, there's so much hard work and focus that goes into creating these wonderful experiences and stuff. And when you are exposed to the industry, you're just like blown away by it. It's wonderful. So you're a bid manager. How long have you been doing that for?
Too long. So I've been involved for 15 months. I was at my previous company for 3.5 years before that. Right. So quite a long time. But even that has changed. So the way you have to, the competitiveness and the whole procurement cycle and from sector to sector. So a lot of our tenders are public sector.
Right.
So we're talking about government projects that can take a long time. So even from, one tender that we won last year, even from the point of knowing that you've won it to it actually starting can take another 6 months.
Wow.
Just because of the levels of governance. And so it can take quite a huge chunk and take over your life, actually.
Right.
But really rewarding at the same time because you're seeing something actually all the way through.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I'm really curious, my wife's a bid manager for a tech company, and she loves it. She loves the process. I lecture at the Miami Ad School, and one of the aspects I work on with them is getting them to understand how to impress the value of what it is that you're bringing to a client, particularly with technology. Because a lot of students don't really understand how to convey the value of where they come from, but also some of the clients they're working with sometimes, particularly when they're working with new technologies, don't really understand how much how much something costs or how long it takes to design, develop, deploy. Where do you see the biggest challenge that you're faced with as a bid manager, and how do you overcome that challenge?
There are a few, and I think it depends on the client and what they're looking for, but you're absolutely right, because there is this, it's almost like you're educating your customers, because there's this, in fact, there's a really high profile case that's in the news at the moment with the post office scandal.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So, I know everybody's kind of focusing on what happened to those people and the victims of all of that. But at the heart of that was a procurement exercise that, in my mind, in my opinion, clearly wasn't thorough, because the bid that won for that technology to even be implemented with its flaws came 7th in quality.
Right.
Out of the 11 bids, but came first in price. And educating your customers that cheapest is not going to give you. And look at the mess they're in now, all these years on. And they knew at an early stage that there were issues, but they had awarded the contract.
Right.
So sometimes it's actually the biggest challenge is educating the customers in knowing what they want. So what is it you actually want? What are you willing to compromise? Because actually the true cost may not be what, you can't have the moon and the stars for your budget. So it's actually managing the customer's expectations is probably one of the hardest things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when a tender is so prescriptive, it's hard to do that because you haven't got that dialogue. You're beyond that dialogue stage. So it really is down to how you get that across, exactly how you said, how to actually put that on paper and put it in words. It is really important to get that across.
And so with regards to your role at Involve, where does that process fit in with that business? So
I'm part of pre-sales. So we have a team of people and that's our only function. So once a tender is won, we pass that over. So it's really contained and really well structured, actually. Gotcha. So although we do work closely with account managers and obviously that they have that relationship with their clients who are going to tender, so it all fits in.
Yep. But
then we handle it from that pre-sales point and then pass it on.
Awesome.
So it's nice and clean.
Yeah. And it just so with regards to Involve, what products are they showcasing at ISE this year? So we're not
showcasing at ISE. We will be at Infocom, but we're not. We haven't got a stand or anything.
No worries. So what's the aim with you guys being here? Are you looking for new business? Are you shaking hands? What's the goal?
So I'm not here with Involve.
Oh, okay. Right. All right.
So I'm here with ISE as part of my podcast.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So they've just like me, they've found wonderful, intelligent, charming people. No, I got that. So you're here to educate.
So my podcast is called What If?
Ah, okay.
And it really focuses on diversity, inclusivity, and equity.
Okay.
And it's a series of conversations like this. just with people from around the industry. And I'm very, very blessed to have the backing of Involve and my team, and to be able to come out and speak to people and raise awareness.
We're allowed to talk about it. I was a bit worried there. I was like, oh God, have I outed you or something?
No. but no, Involve are not here, so they're not,
No, that's fine. So let's talk about diversity and equality, particularly in the AV industry. Traditionally, and I mean this with respect, a lot of the people you meet in the AV space are usually male, usually of the older generation, usually of ethnicity. They're white. It's not a bad thing, because it's not like it's a consciously racist industry, because it is a very expressive industry. But what are your thoughts about the space?
How long have you got?
We've got about 40 minutes.
So the industry, you're absolutely right. Traditionally, it is born out of and it's maturing, right? It's important to say it's progressing and it's maturing, and we are seeing and I think events like this really support diversity, because you're pulling together communities of people from all over the globe. I mean, there are people here from all corners of the world at ISE today, and that can only breed better understanding, better connections with people, understanding cultural differences, because actually just because you are white, male, of a certain age doesn't mean you've had the same life experiences, or you're bringing the same thoughts or values to your organisation. So unless we get those conversations open and actually be talking about things and find out, for me, it's about the why. Why are people in this industry? Why are people working for you? And the why not. So why aren't people working for you? So why are we not seeing people of colour, particularly when I consider higher levels? So if you look at senior management roles across the industry, there's still very few, or there, I think we're getting better with having women at senior levels, but that's about it. So there's work to be done.
Yep.
Another area, I had a fantastic conversation with an absolutely brilliant guy from the States, Anthony Dervigillo, who is living with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy and doing tremendous work. And so there are people who are working with rare diseases like Anthony, people with mental health issues, particularly post-pandemic. So there are all sorts of other things going on with people, and actually the more conversations and the less embarrassed we are about talking about things, and the less we try and cancel, because one thing that I'm really clear about is it's not about cancelling anybody or saying you can't say this anymore or you can't do this. Let's say it and let's open it up and let's understand why it might upset somebody to use certain language, or to organise something that people can't get to, or whatever it is. Unless we have those conversations, we can't progress.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at and where I'm going with my little podcast.
No, absolutely, and it's such an important conversation because visibility starts from debate and how people communicate and think about the scenario we're in. What would you say to communities that don't know anything about the AV industry? How do you think? What would you say to them to help them find the AV space? Because it is a very beautiful space, as you said.
It is. It's really vibrant, and it's definitely there's so much opportunity and so much potential. I think equally alongside that, it's how the industry and how individual organisations within industry place themselves, and actually the message they give that to somebody coming in. And especially, I know there's a lot of initiatives at the moment and a lot of hard work going into apprenticeships and getting younger generation in, so we can plan better for succession planning and that kind of thing as an industry.
Yep.
I think placing yourselves and actually giving that message that this is somewhere and this is an industry where you can progress and there is opportunity and it is somewhere where you can build a career, really becomes powerful when you start seeing people that are like you doing well. And that's just how we are as humans, right? We look at role models. When you see it with children, they're looking at their parents or they're looking at their peers, and then they copy what they're doing, and that's how we learn and that's how we grow.
Yep.
And it's no different.
Awesome. And just with regards to your journey, like where did you start from an academic perspective? Did you know anything about AV before?
So I was a teacher, and because I had some IT skills, I was the IT coordinator for my school. And the school actually, we were one of the first in our boroughs to get smart boards. We were given a load of money by the local authority.
Wow.
In 2005.
Wow. So pre iPhone.
And we had we had smart boards in every classroom. So I was responsible for that project.
Which school was this?
It was a school in Bromley, so it's probably not one that you've heard of, but a reasonably sized school, and smart boards in every classroom with teachers who had no clue how to use them.
Wow. So
it was a mission, and some people obviously adopted it really well. I think it's probably still the case that interactive technologies are. And certainly for the whiteboards, it was definitely the case that they were used as a projection screen because people were a little bit afraid of the technology, but also they didn't have the time to play with it and really understand the potential. But that we've come a long way since then.
Absolutely. So that must have been a really disruptive moment in how people utilize the space around them to teach their students. Were you fearful of that when you were championing that? Or?
Not at all. I mean, it wasn't without its challenges. So being one of the only schools that had, and we had ceiling mounted projectors that we came into school one morning and an entire level had been stolen.
Oh gosh.
So, and then we saw the invention of the security cages and then the orange projectors that, people like Sahara brought out, and projectors that would only work with control panels. And then you would see projectors pop up in pubs that you knew were stolen from a school. It was just, it was carnage. So it wasn't without its, because it was one thing to actually encourage teachers to use the technology, and then for them to come in and find that it wasn't working, or projector's been stolen, or whatever it is, that there were plenty of glitches in those days. So it was never, there was nothing negative about it for me personally.
Yep.
I know there was resistance, but change doesn't happen without that. You've got to have something to create that change, and people have got to go through that pain barrier. Absolutely.
And it's only once you go through that pain barrier that people start to see where something like this can provide value to the experience. So that's interesting. And then from there, you started to work with AV.
Yeah.
What was the first company that you worked for?
I worked for CDEC. And that was a Kent-based integrator. One of the first to get onto the Vector framework, so really at the front end of getting interactive technology into schools, which was really exciting. It was exciting for me as an ex-teacher, and it was exciting to go out to these schools and actually show them what they could do.
Right.
And when I trained to be a teacher, because I am very old, we had Banda machines. So I don't know if you know what that is, but you would queue up and you would handwrite your worksheets for your students. You'd put them through. So this is pre-photocopier, because we had such small budgets for photocopying.
Wow.
And you literally processed it through this machine and had like purple, violet ink all over your hands, and it had a certain smell. And that's how we, created worksheets for our students. And we thought that was cutting edge. We thought we were really, way out there with that. And to see, the replacement of chalkboards with technology that really just brings the world into the classroom, and there's an expectation now, that children have so much technology around them in their homes. Why they're not going to learn that way? So it's, I think that is the one sector that has actually moved and adopted the audiovisual really, really well.
Absolutely. And, at the end of the day, we have to inspire the younger generation. They have to feel connected within the space that they're learning in. So that's really important. That's really interesting. Where do you feel the education space is now with AV? Where do you see a change occurring?
So one thing that I think is really powerful is seeing organisations and seeing collaboration between different organisational establishments. So if you look at organisations like HEPMA over in the States or LTSMG in the UK, and bringing different university managers together to actually share and collaborate, because teaching, it's a funny thing that I remember when inspections first started in schools, and that paranoia of why is somebody coming into my classroom and watching what I'm doing. And that was a really deep-rooted paranoia, and it was a culture of mistrust that if someone's coming in, I must be in trouble, or I'm not doing a good job, or I'm not working hard enough.
Right.
And to see that change and classroom walls come down and people want to collaborate and people sharing ideas and actually saying, do you know what, I used this resource and it was really good. I used this piece of tech and it was, this worked for me. And seeing groups like LTSMG, who now have a really powerful conference every year, seeing them come together and share best practice is phenomenal. And I think that, I don't think people understand the power of groups like that.
Yep.
Because it's those users that will drive the technology and will drive the way and should drive. Right, it should drive the way manufacturers actually and the kind of things, because they're the ones who are facing issues,
right.
Whether it's assistive technology, whatever it is. Manufacturers need to tap into that and actually find out what's working well, what would make their lives easier in at the front, on the front line.
Awesome. So let's we're talking about the industry, and the industry's great. It's vibrant. We've had some really awesome conversations about diversity and what needs to change and how mindsets need to kind of be open. Let's talk about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you studied, where you're from.
So I am from a Pakistani background. My parents were immigrants, came over. My dad came over in the 60s. Mum came over in 1970. I was born here. And real strong ethos of hard work. I think that I think for any immigrant child, that your parents have come here to work. So you work and you study and you work and you study, and that's it. So there was no question that I would go to university and so on. But so my first degree was in education. I then went back and did a master's in leadership at UCL a few years ago. And that's really kind of reinforced my interest in people and teams and coaching and toxic workplaces, and how we can actually have work environments that are true learning environments where, top to bottom, everybody is actually learning something every day. I lectured in between that. So I was teaching, came into AV, went back into teaching, went back into lecturing. So I was running teacher training as well for a few years. And I've always been in and around education. I think the last year and a half, I've kind of stepped back from that, working more with the public sector and government projects. But I think that the theme for me has been technology. And when I think back of being a child, and I had brothers who, on a Sunday we'd pull apart Dad's car and put the dashboard back in and put the stereo back in, put new speaker, and mess around. So I was always messing around with one of my brothers.
Wow! And
so I think that understanding how things connect and what would make the sound better, and what without sounding like the car that nobody wants on their street. But I think that interest in tech and gadgets I think that started from having an 8-track, being the first in the family to have an 8-track in our living room in the 70s.
Wow.
We thought we'd arrived at that point, So, because I still remember our black and white TV.
Yeah.
So, and I remember being the remote. So it's quite, I think that it's just always been there for me, technology.
Absolutely. And that curiosity is so important.
Yeah.
I feel with the overload of technology for youngsters at the moment, sometimes they lose that need to be curious because information is just so easy now. And it's good to be inquisitive and explore and break things apart and have a look at how they work, because it kind of trains your mind to appreciate things in different ways.
I'm excited to see their journey. So my journey went from 8-track, cassettes, CDs, having a CD Walkman, all of that, Blu-ray. I'm really excited to see what my children's journey is, because they barely remember they do remember CDs, but that's about it. Cassettes are way before them. Wow. And it'd be interesting to see if I live long enough to see what their journey is.
You'll live long.
But I don't know if they will have the same. I do wonder if they'll have the same transition as we've had.
Yeah. You touched on that you're from Pakistan. Have you been to Pakistan?
Yeah, several times.
Tell us about Pakistan.
Pakistan is it's an incredibly vibrant country with every weather. So you've got beaches at Karachi, that end, heat, followed by desert. So, and then the further north you get, you've got mountains, snow-capped mountains, the Swat Valley, absolutely stunning landscape, really, really warm people. It's not politically, it's not without its issues. It's got a lot of issues politically, especially in the last few weeks, actually. But on a person level, and the history and the... so my family village is really close to a very famous road called the GT Road, the Grand Trunk Road, which the British built.
Right.
And the British brought the railway, actually. So when during British rule, there is so much architecture there that you look at and you think, this could be a building in London, because it's that, that kind of the very stately court spaces, and in some of the cities still standing. And then that's next to the historical Mughal architecture. The Mughals had such a huge presence, and they didn't do small. You just look at the Taj Mahal. So we've got equivalent. We've got mosques and buildings that have just such intricate architecture. So absolutely stunning country.
This bit of a tangent. What are your thoughts about the AV sector in Pakistan? Like, have you done any work out there?
I haven't, but I am. You see, the system there is so different. So I'm very aware of some of my friends whose children go to really nice schools because they can afford it, and they do have the technology, and they're served by the Dubai sort of hub, if you like. So they have Dubai, India. There's plenty of technology, plenty of things going on in that subcontinent. But when you go into the rural areas, it's just not. So it's not the same as if you went into a rural country, a village school in England. You're still going to find a bit of tech. You won't find it in Pakistan.
Wow, that's
you're still going to have kids sitting on the floor. So it's still part of the third world. In that respect.
Do you go back out there a lot?
Haven't been for a few years, but yes.
And that was because of COVID, I'm assuming? Partly
COVID, and just work and kids being at school and so on. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Life.
So let's talk about, you said you studied leadership. You did an MA in that at UCL. Talk us about your reasoning for wanting to do that, and talk us about the experience of that.
So at the time I was lecturing in teacher training, and I really wanted to research more about, and actually my final thesis was about the use of technology in higher education.
Right.
And I knew that there was a lot of funding being thrown into education to use, and I had to narrow it down for the purpose of my thesis, but I was really interested in lecture capture. So the recording of a live lecture for playback purposes.
Wow.
And the issues that surrounded that. So although you would think that's an amazing idea, that's really good, there are so many problems with it, and the adoption of it with lecturers not pushing the button to record, some universities making that decision for them and saying we're recording everything. The etiquette then of the lecturers who like to pace around and you're trying to record that. So there were lots of different, it threw up a lot of things. But and also then from the student perspective, was that going to affect student attendance? Because if they can get the recording later, are they just going to stay in bed and watch the recording?
Yep.
So so many factors around that and it was really interesting. But it was also interesting to see the amount of money and government funding that was going into some universities, especially some of the higher ranked universities, and how that started to differentiate between, in terms of the rankings, and how it affected students' choice then, because with students then looking at technology that could be provided, how important was that for a student when they're choosing because you think that they're choosing their subject, but they're also choosing the university, the resources, the facilities, and students are now more savvy and want to know, well, how am I going to be taught? And what technology is in place for me. So that suddenly, and actually realising how important that was, got me back in the classroom and just understanding what, and it was tied in. So the reason I chose leadership over a technology-based MA, firstly, I didn't find one there wasn't an MA that kind of fitted. But leadership really was about, how do we drive that? How do we drive change? How do we actually create a learning culture within our organisations? How do students learn? How do we learn? So it really brought together all of that. And a big part of that was coaching. And it made me realise how much I prefer coaching as an approach to mentoring, and people don't understand that there are such different approaches.
So let's talk about that. What's the difference between coaching and mentoring? So
in a nutshell, mentoring is more follow me, do as I do. I'm going to be really crude and just keep that really simple. That's it's you're shadowing somebody or. Whereas coaching is really listening to a person, finding out where they want to go and getting them to that point, and just giving them a framework to get there. And that to me is so much more powerful, and it sits more naturally with how I am. Just simply showing somebody, and it's almost like, this is how I've baked a cake, so you follow my, do it my way and you will have the perfect cake.
Got you.
That person isn't going to know until they actually do it. So I think it's the doing part in the coaching that is there with mentoring, but it's almost, what do you want in your cake? What do you want the ingredients to be?
Right.
What flavour do you want?
Yeah.
Just because I've made a chocolate cake doesn't mean you've got to make a chocolate cake. So it's that freedom for the person to actually evolve themselves.
Gotcha. Very interesting. And then, so what were your findings on that experiment that you did when you did your MA? What was your final perspective on the outcome?
So I was looking at the whole technology enablement piece, and it actually became very apparent that without strong leadership, the projects that failed, where the money was there, and the money's there. It starts off with whoever's at the top saying, we're going to put in lecture capture, or we're doing this across the university for all of our students. The universities who did well had strong buy-in at the top, and that was consistent and it was maintained, and it wasn't just left. It wasn't something that was a directive that was left to be run and then it just went.
Yep.
And unfortunately, a lot, it didn't work because there wasn't the buy-in at senior level, and there wasn't the understanding of why we're doing this.
Yeah.
I don't think people ask why enough.
Yes. Yeah.
So, so that, I kind of knew that, but it was interesting to find out that I was on the right lines.
Absolutely. And I think, for those listening, it's so important. I'm just working, as a consultant, I get so many companies asking me, I want to do this, I want to do that, I'm interested in this type of technology. Everyone's talking about this. How do we get into it? And I always say to them, it's so important. Why do you want to explore this medium? And a lot of the time they don't really have the answer. What are your thoughts on that? How do you think we can overcome that challenge when someone asks?
I think the first thing is, the other thing that I think is really key, and it's to me, it's key to my conversations around diversity. Who have you got around the table actually discussing the why?
Yep.
And if you're not looking at it from a broad enough perspective, and that doesn't mean that if you've got 1,000 people in your organization, all 1,000 have a voice, but you might actually on one level put out a questionnaire for everybody and get your finger on the pulse, but have a user group that actually represents different elements of your business, your organization, your school, your university, whatever it is, because people will bring their perspectives, and that will give you the why and the why not.
Right.
And it will tell you whether something is going to be, adopted, and why not do that from the outset, not once the technology is in place.
Yes. Yeah. Otherwise, you're left with something that has so much potential, but just starts to gather dust ultimately.
It really does.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, look, let's start talking a little bit about What If, podcast about diversity. Tell us about it.
So What If is, so in 2020, I first started to have some conversations. We were in lockdown, started to connect with people more, a lot more people online, virtually. A big fan of the AV Tweeps on Twitter. And just through those regular conversations, so many things were coming out, and the experiences people were having globally, and the inequity around that really struck a chord with me. And it's not live yet, but it will be soon. I am behind schedule with it. I played with the words diversity, inclusivity, and equity, and I put it in that order, with a T on the end for today, and called it Diet AV.
Right.
And it really has a food theme. So it's about learning things in bite-sized chunks, giving people takeaways, but it's also has a focus on allergies. And so I really, because to me, I kind of saw that first year of lockdown where people were saying, you got to get out, you got to go for a walk, you got to take care of your body and your mental health and all of that. And yet we were not thinking about how toxic our workplaces can get. And we're not doing any health checks on our workplaces. So that's where the seed grew from.
Yep.
And at the heart of what I'm trying to do is really to simplify the whole piece around diversity, because it's not complicated. It's not a tick box exercise, and we can keep it simple. Treat each other with respect. Consider people's voices in your organization, and not make excuses, or stop making excuses for why not.
Yep.
So that's at the heart of it. And it's a series of conversations at the moment. So the What If is the podcast element of Diet AV.
Yep.
That is live now on YouTube. And the website is a work in progress.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And then just... You touched on something really interesting there, the health check, the workplace health check. How do you health check yourself?
So that's something that I'm building together for organisations as a bit of a checklist, but it depends how deep and how seriously people want to take it.
Right.
But even down to, it is about opening up your policies, procedures, and actually working through that and getting a strong understanding and making sure that everybody, top to bottom, understands what it is like to work in any organisation and what it means. So I know for ISOs and quality marks and so many things, people have got so many policies in place. But if you asked anybody in your organisation about something, would they know? And that's the bit. And if you can make it simple enough, they will know.
Yeah.
So I'm all about simplifying things and just making things a bit more accessible for everybody.
Got you. Have you ever struggled with any mental health issues?
Absolutely. I mean, just going back, the last couple of years have actually been quite a challenge.
Right.
Going into lockdown, being a single mum, that responsibility of keeping my children healthy and safe, as well as the isolation. There was a period of not seeing. I mean, I hadn't seen another. The only other adults I saw was clapping on the doorstep on a Thursday night for the NHS. You know, so that was really hard. And I also lost family members last year. So one to COVID, and so we're all human, right? We can't. And then I think with me, work was my go-to. So you end up working longer hours, and you can't sustain that if you're not processing and not talking and not dealing with it.
Yeah.
And even having a strong network of friends and family and all of that, with all the will in the world, there are times where you just become overwhelmed.
Right.
And recognizing it as part of being human and not treating it as a flaw is just so important.
Absolutely.
And actually realizing that you've got to embrace every day and be grateful for what you have here and now.
Yeah. How did you overcome it?
I don't know that I have. I think you learn to live. I think there are certain losses and certain things that happen that you end up with those battle scars. You know, it's the scars that actually you then learn to live with and learn to love. I don't know if anybody ever does overcome that level of loss. I don't think.
Thank you so much for your honesty on that. It's a very serious thing. I mean, everyone, has mental battles that they have to fight every day. Sometimes it's harder than, other days.
Yep.
And I think talking about it's so important because it shows that we're all on that same page, and we should all listen to each other.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that. If you were to meet you when you first started becoming a professional, what advice would you give yourself?
I know this because it hit me quite hard, actually. So I lost my sister and my brother last year within a month of each other.
I'm so sorry.
And we're just a year on from that. And it hit me very, very hard that actually too often we're afraid to let go of the good instead of going for the great. We stay within our comfort zones. We stay where we think we're safe and how other people want us to be. And it's okay. And we put up with so much instead of just going for it and go for the great, because you just don't know how much better things can be for you. And that's been a really tough lesson for me to actually accept and admit, really, to myself.
Wow. Well, you are great. No, you are. But you're totally right. So many people just stay in that kind of bubble because it's safe, as you say.
And we're only here once, as far as we know. None of us know any different, right?
Absolutely. We're literally specks of dust just floating around.
Yeah. And none of us are that important. I think that people take themselves too seriously as well. And exactly what you said, we are just a dot in the scheme of things. We are literally just a speck of dust.
And just going back to when you're in that bubble, sometimes someone can come along and burst that bubble, and you're like, oh, I thought this would be around forever.
Yep.
And it never is.
No.
So I'm totally on the same page as you. It's so important. That's cool. That's really cool. Look, we've been speaking just over 45 minutes. Just the last thing, if anyone wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
I'm on Twitter all the time at Iffsi, IFFSI.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, I'm everywhere. So, definitely get in touch. What if you put in at what if, it brings up the
And that's with a double
podcast.
F, isn't it?
Double F.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. WHATIFF.
Yeah.
Awesome. And you're on Instagram as well, I
Yes.
noticed. Can I?
Yeah,
Which
you
is
can.
at IFFS31.
Yes.
Cool. Iffat, it's been absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for being so open. You're the first one on this ISE Tiger Heart Chat collaboration. So thank you so much for that bravery.
Absolute pleasure.
Those of you listening, thanks so much for the support. I get so many messages every day. I love it. I really get a lot of value from the fact that you guys get a lot of value from this. Please share. Don't forget the hashtag Tiger Heart Chats, all one word. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, please be good.